Hello, my name's Emma Fordyce-Rudge and I'm here today with Paula Bradshaw, who is an experienced finance director and has agreed to have a chat with me. So hi Paula.
Well, thank you, Emma. Just to give a bit of background about me, and I originally trained with Pricewaterhouse in London and went through the classic route of working mainly in industry for mainly marketing communications agencies. And then became a finance director when I was 31 for a family and business actually. And then took a bit of time out when I had my kids, moved to Bristol from London, and then sort of went back into a variety of different businesses, from private equity to PLCs, but also enough focused again back on family-owned businesses across that size. So different sectors, different sizes of businesses, and different types of companies. So very broad.
Fantastic. Well, I think we'll get lots of really interesting insights from you today, because you've seen it from the family business side, but also worked with other types of business. So thank you for your time. So if you're a family business looking to make perhaps your first finance director recruit, or perhaps it's not gone so well in the past and you want to think about how you can make it better next time, what should family businesses be doing or thinking about when they're thinking about making that recruit?
Yeah, I think if you're bringing somebody in from the outside, and most people in the business have come up, either their family members or generally people have come up through the business as well, then you have to think about, when bringing somebody in from the outside, it will be quite different for all them. They might probably generally come from a corporate background. So there are, significant differences between working within a family business and working in the corporate side. So you have to think about what it is that you want from that person, and, what would you like them to contribute. But also think about, who do you have within your senior management team at the moment? What is the current dynamics? And be fairly open about that as well, and think about that, because it is quite a big change. People who come from corporate backgrounds are used to more structure, but the advantages of being in a family-owned business is really around, you're very agile. You can make fast decisions. Your plans, you don't have to make long-term plans, because you can move quite quickly as you go through. And that's what gives that agility and success for a family-owned business. Often it comes through that. And so, you just need to think about what it is that you want this person, and how would you really like them to interact with everybody else within the business.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So say they're meeting a selection of people that they're going out to the market. Do you think there are certain things that they should be looking for, sort of qualities from the finance director, if they are looking?
Yeah, I think people that come in from other businesses, low ego is probably one of those. You really don't want to come in and somebody who will come in and throw their weight around, because they'll just get everybody's backs up instantly, and they might not intentionally realise that that's what they're doing, because in the businesses they've worked at before, that's how it's worked for them. So it's not an intentional thing. So I think you need to have somebody that has that agility and flexibility, but also to change with how they interact with people within business. You need someone, if you are recruiting somebody who is experienced, they do have they've got their background, they have the experience that what they've done, they do have their own ideas as well, and you need to just go through that and just make sure that what their ideas are aligned with your what you would like to do, and also particularly around your culture. Family businesses have a very strong way of working, and more than I would say in other businesses I've worked at, and that's also for a business, it has been very successful for them, because if you bring somebody in and it works, and you fit with that culture, and then the rewards come with that, and you've got someone who is very much aligned with the goals and objectives of the business.
You mentioned low ego, so somebody that it can be sort of flexible and also maybe a bit sort of under the radar? Is that sort of what you're thinking? Like just not throwing their weight around in the business at the moment they're getting, so sort of watch and wait type thing.
Yeah, I think that initial, when someone comes in, you do need somebody who is and it's probably more than the original 100 days. Most people talk about 100 days, and you'll come in and not do very much for 100 days, just sit and listen. It's longer than that, but you are bringing in somebody with experience, so they will have, as I said before, they will have their ideas. So I think it's about someone who has the ability to consider a situation, and then sort of react and approach it accordingly. So it's more around when you're in family businesses, you do have a circle of trust with those advisors that you've known for a long time and you like working with, and so, if you're bringing someone in from the outside, they're not in that original circle. So you've got to, for them to be successful, you want them to give their best when they're in that. So it's probably, you need to also listen to what they're saying, but then help them through that longer journey about how they transition into the way that the company works, but also understanding about what your long-term objectives, and that they probably might suggest things that a different way of doing something. And when they do that, it's often not that the way you've done before has been wrong or bad, but there are different options out there, and I think it's important to listen to that. So you've got to be with that person quite open and honest as well. I think that's also key, so that they can really understand where you're coming from, and why you've done things the way you have been doing that, what things probably are not movable. And what things are doing, and even when something's not movable, how might you think about changing that if it's needed, if it's not needed, obviously, but just guide them through that journey as well.
You mentioned a couple of times, Paula, about how the family business themselves need to be really clear on what their objectives are and what they want for that person. So it sounds like you're describing almost like a pre-process, if I can put it that way, that they need to do some reflection before going out to the market.
Yeah, definitely. I think some internal reflection. I mean, unlike a PLC, which will have a strategic plan or a 3 to 5 year plan, quite often that isn't the case, and I think it is about as I said, bringing someone in with experience. So how would you like to use their experience, and where do you think that benefit where would you like to see that benefit within the business? So definitely, it doesn't have to be a massive pre-plan. It just needs to be a few thoughts about what would work, and then look at in previous hires, where it has worked. If you have had somebody external in and it has worked, why do you think that has worked? But then when it hasn't worked, just be honest about why that might not have worked. What was it about that person or the circumstances or their experience that meant that they weren't successful within your business?
So learning from those past, if there have been some which either have gone well or not so well, let's learn from that and take that forward into the new recruits. And you also mentioned something quite interesting around very interesting around the the fact that the person coming in will inevitably want to do things differently, but particularly you mentioned about having their own circle of trust with advisors that they've used and things like that. So could you just talk a little bit more about that and how how that, because that's quite a shift, isn't it? From you're not essentially, I think what you're saying is you're not just getting one new person, you might be getting like a group of new people.
Yeah, and a good CFO FD will have a strong network of people they've worked for with their own advisors, and they can add a lot of value as well. And I think it's from saving money particularly is one of those things, but also if you're thinking about longer term planning, possibly about succession, what's going to happen, then they will have access to those people who can really help with that. And when you do bring, as somebody coming in externally and bring it, you're not bringing in because you want to interfere with what's going on, but you're bringing in people who you think might help. And ultimately that chemistry might not work, but when it does, it can really open people's eyes and really help with that, bit of forward planning that you might want to have with a business. Because the advisors that you have used before, as an FD, have helped you to save money, and they have helped to, I don't know, buy another business or sell a business or or support in many ways, and I think that's they're not bringing those people in to change things. They're bringing in to really help where they think the business might want them.
Yeah, I mean, I think
to make it more successful.
From a business's perspective, knowing who to turn to in the advisor market, it's really tricky, isn't it? Because everybody's saying they can do a great job, but actually if that person can bring people they know have got that track record of supporting and can work with that FD or other senior hire, then I can see that would add huge value. But there also seems like there might be some, that might be an area of potential rub if there are advisors that are already working with the family business. Is that an area of tension that does come up in practice?
It comes from say auditors that they might have worked with for a long time, to to insurance, to all that side of it. And I think the way to approach that is certainly what I've done is that actually, okay, well, you have had somebody in there for a while who's been working in whatever circumstance they are. Why don't we put this out to tender? So that the person you've got in there already has a chance and can prove themselves, and they might well be the best person. But there's no harm in periodically going out and having a look at somebody else, and then you might find that actually that person or that those advisors will add more benefit to but it does mean that the person the advisors you currently have in place do have a chance to really prove that they want. And also what's also good for maybe the current advisors, it does make them think about what they've done and what they could do and how they might better improve their service. So it could be that they remain in place, but you've opened it out to say, look, actually that this is what other people are doing, so if you change what you do, you could really sort of help to benefit that.
So a fresh look at
what's what's going on in the business and how that's working.
And so you've made your decision, you've got a new person joining the senior leadership team, possibly an FD type role. And you talked about the first 100 days and perhaps extending out that bedding in period, if I can put it that way. What is it that the family business can be doing to support that person in that sort of initial period?
I think it's probably, it's more than it might even be a year. Actually, it's a year is probably a good way of looking at that.
It's funny because I was sort of 1,000 days is 3 years, 100 days, something somewhere in the middle of that.
Be open about the dynamics within the business, be that people or how it's working, and give them a really good induction. We talk about ways of working and people having strong cultures, so let them make sure that they do have that, over that. That's really, really important because, and also, what's working well, what maybe isn't working well, and where you might, where there might be in, your new person's approach, there might be tension, just which bits do you need to be more careful of, and which bits and others. So I think it's it is about and also that person coming in will make mistakes or may say something that does inevitably ruffle feathers. And so just how you're going to broker those situations, that's the case, because you put a lot of effort into finding this person, you brought them into the business, and you don't want that first one thing to then basically this person sort of says, oh, I'm not staying, this is not right for me, and vice versa. So you both made a commitment, so you both need to work out how you're going to get through that period. So again, I think it's being open and honest, and working through any bits of conflict, but also then, listening to what, once somebody's been in and they've been in there for a bit, ask them what they think. Ask them to do a bit of a review, but also, within that review, so what in their view might be important and what's not so important. So that they feel coming in that they're contributing rather than just sitting on the side and being, feeling that they can't really say anything because, I think, people who've been with the business for a long time maybe won't do that challenge either. A good FD will challenge. You have to, your responsibilities are to the business and to the finances of the business and making sure that the future of the business is secure. So the other thing is probably around, we'll talk about, things like planning. So I talked about that before. You work in the corporate world, you generally have a 3 to 5 year plan. Many smaller, well, not necessarily smaller, but family owned or other businesses don't have a much more sort of flexible way of working and don't really have that plan. But what that can do is looking out, not 5 years, but even, a couple of years, is it gives the finance director something to work towards as well. I, totally appreciate that you can make quick decisions and agility, but you do have, it's really important to look at the finances business. We work in a really uncertain world at the moment. Things can change all the time. You've got to build, as a finance director, you've got to rebuild a robust asset base within that business. And to do that, you do need to plan out a bit to understand, where your revenues go and how you're going to manage your costs. Where's your cash, which is the key thing, for any business, how you're going to manage that cash. If you want to do things with the business, buying assets or buying another business or something like that, you do have to think about where that might come from. And I think even, it's actually many companies don't even have a full year budget for a year or a forward cash flow for a year, but actually bringing that in it gives much more certainty and security for the business to be able to make some of those other decisions in so it's not a criticism of how the business is currently running, but it is about in this current world you've really got to think about the future and have a bit of a plan in there. It doesn't have to be a massive 50-page plan, but it does have to be, you've got to keep thinking forward.
So it's not, like you said, it's not a criticism, it shouldn't be taken on, but it's an opportunity for improvement.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so obviously we're focusing on family businesses today, and if the family business is at a point where it's looking to make senior external recruits, it's probably, not always, but probably at the point where it's multi-generational in some way. So do you think is sort of family exposure to the family engagement and those relationships, how important is that in that early phase or even before you join?
I think it's really, really important actually, because particularly if you're handing over to the next generation, those that set up the business or necessarily have created a strong culture, and then you've got some the next generation coming in, and they will have new ideas and they'll think about other things. So when you're recruiting that person, you've got to get that balance of somebody who is able to work with the current generation, but also the next generation and their aspirations, because they will have aspirations as well about what they want to do with the business. So they, the more people you can bring into that process when you're recruiting, the better. And don't hide things. There's no point in hiding things, because otherwise that person comes in and then they've joined and then they'll find it, and then again you end up with conflict, and it's really about not managing that. So I know within family businesses, people do keep things more, not all the time, but keeping them more close to their chest about how it's working. But with your finance person, they are key to the whole business, and you do need to bring them in to that, so they understand everything. There's no point in keeping things, from them, because it will have they as a finance person, is your responsibility to manage that, and you do need to understand what's happening. And then thinking about that succession. And what do you want to do with the business in 5 years? You obviously, if you've got the next generation coming in to manage it, that's great, but you might not have that, or it might not work. So what might you think about doing with the business as people come on to retire, or so again with your finance director, bring them on board with that conversation.
Yeah, because you're going to need them.
Because you are going to need them, and what you wouldn't want to do is lose somebody part of the way through that process, because whereas actually if you've brought them on board and they understand what the next stages are and they can see the plan going forward, that makes them feel more comfortable about staying with the business and what happens next. Last thing is you want to go through all this process, recruit somebody, and then they become like, oh, I didn't really know that, and that's a bit uncertain, and make them doubt about the reasons why they joined in the first place.
Okay, thank you for those insights. So just flipping it now then and saying, okay, well, you're a finance director looking for your next role. You're potentially looking at a family business role. What should you be sort of thinking about when you're considering taking on a role in a family business?
Yeah, I think it is very different. To working in the corporate world, I think the benefits, there are really big benefits. It's much more flexible, it's very adaptable, you get to see the whole business, you're a very integral part in what's going on, and but ultimately, it is their business, and I think that's a key thing. But it's the same whether you work in private equity. It's not quite the same as working in a PLC with with a multitude of shareholders, because that's a whole different management thing. But so you might not agree with some of the decisions that have been made or whatever, but it is their business, so you have to respect that going forward. And I think it is hugely rewarding, and to see, to be part of that success and to see it grow, and you can see it, you don't have to, you are really an integral part of that success, and and also if you're working for a PLC, you are, you have to deal with all the rules and regulations around that, of which there are a lot now. And you do have to do that in a private business or a family-owned business. There's no doubt there is, but it is much more flexible, in terms of, you don't have those restrictions in the same way. So and I think having worked at the rewards of working and helping people to really move on, be it from a finance director side, and I've seen it, when you come into a business and there's no data, of any analysis, there's no analysis at all. And if you're able to come in and go, well, actually, if we put in these systems and we start collecting this data, and by the way, look what this gives us, and you can really see the profitability of these things, or, actually, if we looked at our cash forecasting, this is where we're at. I think that really that opens people's eyes to potential other opportunities as well. So it is, you can make a difference quite quickly.
Huge difference. But
huge difference. Yeah. Whereas, in other businesses, the structure's already there. Yeah. You can't really change very much. Yeah. So, you're just really, it's almost like a small cog in a big wheel.
Yeah. Whereas here, you can come in and potentially make things that are going to make a huge difference to the trajectory of the business and to the family. Yeah. And you talked about feeling part of that team. So really, I guess this is reflecting on whether that's something that would light your fire and is going to sort of align with your career goals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And with the sort of other side of that, shadow side really, what are the challenges you should be prepared for?
I think it's a case of, if you, as I mentioned before, it is their business, right? So, you have to respect that in what you do. And, sometimes when you put stuff forward, it might not be the right thing. So you cannot get, you can't get offended by that or let that impact the work that you do. And so you sort of have to find a way around doing that, be it actually leading on over a longer period, I would have said, some change. Things that you might think actually you could do quite quickly, you just might have to do it over time so that you get people's buy-in first. Really important to get that buy-in. But ultimately, they might not want to do it anyway at all. So you just have to respect that as well going forward. And I think, once you are part of the that trusted group and that's great. So, but there's some work to get in there, as I said, and I think that comes back to this whole sort of low ego part of it. Don't come in and throw your weight around. Take your time over it to do that, and then adapt as well. And different people have different ways, and particularly within family groups. So you have to, what works with one person might not work with another.
Really interesting, and particularly around the time frames, because you hear so much, and it's true in my experience, that family businesses take a long-term view. So actually you as the finance director have to be able to do the same, and actually perhaps you're used to making change in a really quick time, and actually you have to play the long game a little bit to get everybody on board. Really interesting. Okay, thank you. So is there anything, Paula, that we've covered quite a lot of ground today, looked at it from both sides. Is there something that you're like, if people watching this could take one thing away from what you've said and the nuggets of wisdom you've given us, what would that one thing be?
I think to be open and honest on both sides. Just if you're open and honest with things that work and things that don't work, but in a way that doesn't mean people get defensive or feel difficult about it, or and that it is from someone coming from a different background, it is a big change, so you respect that from both sides, from someone coming in and from somebody being in there. But if you're open and honest and work your way through that over time, and just then actually it can become an extremely rewarding relationship.
No, I'm glad you chose that, because that's something I would advocate as well. And it, like you said, it doesn't always come easily, especially where family dynamics and are involved. There is a tendency to want to keep things a secret, but that relationship's going to be so important to everybody's success. So great. Well, thank you very much. Okay. I think as somebody that's taken on several finance director roles in family businesses, I consider you an advocate for this, and I'm really glad that you're able to share some of your thoughts with us. Thank you, Paula. Okay.